almost any developed theory in this sphere, we use some of its methods and tools in our practice to make easy and available our work. Especially, we'll introduce you today digital projects and tools that are applied in experience with Old Armenian, their possibilities and lacks according to our experiments working as philologists or Armenian researchers in the Matenadaran. We should keep in mind one more important circumstance. The Armenian philology is being developed not only in Armenian, but as well in many scientific centers all over the world. In difference with Armenian centers, many other scientific centers work in digital humanities area with some achievements. So we distinguish these two parts in our work, emphasizing situation in Armenia. At first, we want briefly introduce Old Armenian. Old Armenian or Grapar was officially accepted in 5th century, was officially used in 5th to 12th centuries. In spite of that, there have been written and printed many books and works in Old Armenian till the 19th century. Since the 5th century, many valuable historical, theological, philosophic, grammatical works have been created and translated from Greek, Syrian. Majority of them are important sources, both for Armenians and neighboring nations, as well for superpowers of that period. For using these sources, historian scholars, art historians need profound knowledge of Old Armenian. This is relevant for both types of specialists in Armenia and abroad. For Armenology, one of the main sources are manuscripts. The most of them are in Old Armenian. Almost Armenian manuscripts in Matenadaran are written in Old Armenian. For every researcher of manuscripts, it is necessary to have profound knowledge in Old Armenian. There aren't Old Armenian classes in the schools of Armenian, except some schools where it is optional. Old Armenian is taught in universities only. So, do digital technologies meet the requirements of these groups in learning Old Armenian and working with Old Armenian texts? Do they make easy various researches in Old Armenian? Internet and digital world give us great opportunities. There are many books represented in many formats such as PDF, ebook in Armenian and foreign webs and repositories. In this respect is especially great the role of a fundamental scientific library of National Academy of Science and National Library of Armenia. They have created webs and repositories. However, these repositories give us opportunities to have only digital example of any book written in Old Armenian. Their aim wasn't to make database and tools for working with them. The first example of that type database and digital libraries was Digilib AM Web. From 1999, a group of specialist researchers at the National Academy of Science in Matenadaran started the digitalization works and developed a database from preserving the Armenian cultural heritage. So this project came into existence. The library raised funds to digitize the classical Armenian literature from 5th to 19th centuries. As it declares in the aims of web, this project has been established as a platform for the collection, preservation and presentation to the worldwide audience some of the enormous cultural wealth contained in the rich holdings of the Armenian national repositories all over the world. One of peculiarities of web is that text access with some processing that enable to take the layout of printed page from database and make searches. There is a tool connected with Old Armenian dictionaries that also have been accessed in database. Here the text that we can copy it, and here connection with a dictionary. This project also has opportunity of making researches, but it's of value for one-word searchings, but not for word combinations. Because in the second case, it brings us huge number of texts, not only where are that combination, but also where are words of combination separately. Also, it has an opportunity of making thematic search in it. We can't find the word, for example, only in historiography. On the other hand, the project doesn't present all Armenian literature heritage that beforehand was declared in his goals as one of the main challenges of site. Certainly, it still works, and now the game becomes rich with new materials, but it is obvious retardation compared with his primary aims and energy. With its aims and challenges, it must be on the first place, but actually it isn't. The second project that I want to talk about is Nairi. It's the largest library of electronic Armenian dictionaries. The site has its roots as a Western Armenian dictionary with integrated spell checker, word stammer, and a virtual keyboard. Over the years, the site has grown to incorporate Eastern Armenian as well as bilingual Armenian dictionaries, and now it contains more than 18,000 main words, 95 dictionaries. Practically, it is the most used database in Armenian languages. 8 of 95 dictionaries are in Old Armenian. Web has a user-friendly interface, specially designed structure gives the program a chance to make a global search without indicating any dictionary, as well as look for a word only in one chosen dictionary. The next project is Grapar AM. Website is created in 2013 as one of many 2013. It has the aim of making classic Armenian accessible to everyone through video tutorials, handouts, and many other tools contained on the website. Through this website, creators have tried to help audience to explore more about the language of ancestors and to find out for themselves that Grapar or Old Armenian is not a complicated but rather rich and beautiful language, which rather than being used only by the church today, also enriches the two branches of our language, Eastern and Western Armenian. This website has educational and training goals. As dictionary, it connects with Nairi.com, and as a reading material, gives Old Armenian texts, taking them from the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Researchers Center's website. One of useful projects for linguistics in recent years has been Eastern Armenian National Corpus, but as name testifies, it's for one part of contemporary Armenian. But its structure and aims can help us for making such database with tools. Anyway, the immediate objective of this project is to help linguists find and explore sentences in texts that meet specific search criteria. Eastern Armenian National Corpus allows searching for word forms and lexemes, part of speech categories, morphological attributes, and inflection types, punctuation, contextual queries, and collections. These are the main projects of Armenology in the Armenian. For those beyond of Armenian, we must remember Old Armenian text database created by Departure of Comparative Linguistics at Leiden University. A program has been developed for collecting computer-readable classical Armenian text, analyzing them morphologically and comparison where possible with their Greek originals. And one more program is the Jerusalem Armenian Database, a collection of texts in classical medieval Armenian. Most of these texts were entered through the joint Leiden Jerusalem Armenian Database project. The Leiden Armenian Database contains most of these texts and a substantial number of additional ones. But these two projects haven't open access for working with Leiden Databases texts. You must pay. Thus, here are the main projects and resources in the digital world that introduce Old Armenian text and facilitate problems of researchers working with Old Armenian texts. They aren't perfect, but they can provide a path forward to more useful tools. Also, as linguists working with Old Armenian manuscripts, we want to outline some questions that we face and try to solve in our daily practice and which could be solved with digital tools easier and more quickly. We researched and described old and medieval Armenian manuscripts for cataloging them in the project of General Catalog of Armenian Manuscripts of the Mashdot Matenadara. Description includes detailed scrutiny of manuscripts, both its external state condition and contents with colophons and many other notes. First of all, we count pages to ascertain if all pages have been preserved of manuscripts. We must find out and notice those pages that have been lost, and we must read what pages are that. Sometimes it's very difficult. We try different methods, one of which is finding a printed book of that context, clear out what part is missing in the manuscript, then we count how many words or letters there are in one page of book and manuscript, determine its proportion. With all these data, we attempt to know how many pages are absent. We think that this method and process can be more effective doing by digital tools, not by researchers. The second, it's well known that besides complete manuscripts, there are a significant number of fragments which constitute arguments of manuscript that used to exist once but have failed to reach us or reach separately from that page. It can take a lot of effort to restore potential data or the main manuscript. More often it's impossible. But if we can't do this, we must determine its content. Sometimes it's very difficult. It takes weeks, even months. But with some thematic database, it will be solved, we think. Then with accessing colophons to specific database with some tools, we can analyze lexicon of any scriber and ascertain a manuscript scriber without his name. Also, we can do different linguistic researchers with such database and special tools. These are several questions we faced every day, but there are hundreds of them. And we think that contact with experienced researchers in the realm give us opportunity for making our researchers more perspective with new ideas and concepts that will facilitate not only Armenian, but also for many other scholars, researchers. Thank you.
Okay, questions? We have some experts on Armenian sitting back there, so. I think this is a classic example of a language of immense cultural importance that is much less known than that importance deserves. That's not very clear English. More people should be working with Armenian at all levels, and it's been the case. And I think my hope is that we will be able to increase that number and increase the role that classical Armenian, the Armenian, all forms of Armenian are able to play.
And we think we have a big way to pass, and we will pass it with these projects as participating in that projects, because now I have many ideas that I will take with me to Armenian, and we maybe do something in our country with open access for all researchers from all over the world. Thank you very much.
I will point out that my home, my American home, Cambridge, Massachusetts, is next to one of the largest Armenian communities outside of Armenia. So we have a major cultural library, and Tufts University has 2 endowed chairs in Armenian studies. My colleague, Professor Christina Moranci, sends her greetings.
All right, now let me make sure that that's actually showing up. Good.
Thank you for having me. So today we'll be speaking about challenges in the natural language processing of cuneiform inscriptions and some possible solutions to advanced methodologies in digital Assyriology. I will be discussing these topics from the point of view of the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative, or CDLI. Assyriology is the study of text and history of Mesopotamia, ancient Iraq, and neighboring regions. Its ancient inhabitants wrote on clay tablets, from accounts to epics, in multiple languages and for more than 3 millennia. There are approximately 500 to 600,000 of such inscribed artifacts distributed in collections around the world. Digital Assyriology has had an early beginning with thematic or period-centric databases being put together as early as the end of the 60s. With the democratization of the internet, some of these databases, such as the CDLI, extended their offer to the web. That's what it looks like today. Database projects were generally thought as a research tool to assist scholars in producing paper publications. Because of this tradition, but keeping in mind that there are some exceptions, most projects are only barely starting to comply thoughtfully to open access principles. Online publications are thought as an extension of paper publications and limit access to the data that make them live, either by using restrictive licenses and or by leaving important technical barriers to access the data. For instance, in some cases, a scraper is required to extract information from a project. This means that acquiring the data for natural language processing experiments can be challenging depending on which text you're interested in. But there's some recent happy developments. For instance, ORAC now offers multiple JSON dumps, and the CDLI also recently started offering its catalog dump in a non-proprietary format. The CDLI is part of the astrological research landscape. It is the most complete database listing these ancient artifacts and hosts an approximate of 320,000 entries. A third of these entries is illustrated, generally with a composite image of pictures of all sides of the artifact. In case of clay tablets, they're called fat crosses. This isn't an envelope. The text is encased into this object. The CDLI also offers services such as a search tool, a knowledge wiki, glossaries, and useful downloads. Around 35% of entries have transliterations, or transcriptions if you prefer, associated to them, which encode the textual information present on the artifacts. These translations are stored using encoding schemes specific to cuneiform languages. There are no shared standards among digital Assyriology projects. The encoding standards that are most widely used are CDLI ATF and ORAC ADF, which are similar. Others will, for instance, obey to print imperatives, such as in the case of Ashibab standard, that uses accented characters to represent second and third homophones of the reading of a cuneiform sign, and will only partially number lines. There are also discrepancies in how much information concerning the structure of the text should be noted, including, for instance, clues about the positioning of the text on the artifact and the level of breakage where the inscription should appear. The plurality of encoding standards, in fact, that some of them are geared for print instead of machine readability, and the misalignment of what data, textual and structural, should be encoded are a first barrier to establishing shared natural language processing tools. Note that Patrick Burns will be discussing the Python classical language toolkit tomorrow. Just wanted to say that in my opinion, it would be a great place to centralize such shared tools when they are developed. The current prevalent system for the generation of annotations of cuneiform text is ORAC's rule and dictionary-based automated limitizer. If you have been part of the global Philology project from the beginning, you probably heard of ORAC's limitizer by its creators. The limitizer creates inline glossing, attributing linguistic information to tokens based on glossaries and manual verification. After an automated processing step, the user can decide to update the annotation associated with the tokens according to their personal analysis. And this process is iterative. ORAC has recently released a new editor to facilitate the addition of ORAC API files and to manage this lemmatization process. See on screen, this is their editor. The limitations of rule and dictionary-based methods are twofold. In the case of large corpora, if the texts are not very homogeneous, the time required to verify each line makes this type of approach impractical. The important need for human involvement is due to the second challenge, contextual disambiguation. ORAC works with project-based glossaries that enhance results compared to using a general glossary. To achieve a reliable, unsupervised method, context would need to also be restricted to smaller units, for example, texts and line or sentence, if you prefer. Statistical methods are gaining in popularity in the field of Assyriology and are especially used for network analysis, either for topographical studies or to understand the correlation between other types of entities. Textual or corpus analysis methods are also being employed for topic analysis and other cluster analyses to understand literary trends or, interestingly, to ascertain the provenance of texts. These methods are either employed on already lemmatized corpora or in raw corpora that is manually processed. These approaches necessitate the intensive involvement of the researcher at one stage or another of the process. Identifying the right information requires intelligent discernment, and processing a large number of texts requires extensive time commitment. So to reiterate, even when using more advanced statistical methods, we're still faced with the same limitations with time commitment and to resolve ambiguity. In other words, the data must be refined before applying the algorithms. Machine learning is mostly absent from methodological research, but it seems inevitable to consider the integration of such techniques to overcome the current barriers in digital exploration of the language we study. Tasks such as annotation, translation, information retrieval, this on large corpora of text would benefit from methods that can resolve ambiguities and learn from new input. There's been a resurgence of neural network experiments in the past years. A popular example of the visibility of neural networks is Google's release of SyntaxNet, built on open source software TensorFlow. Looking at experiments applied to the English language texts and other languages material, statistical machine learning methods and neural network methods show promising results. How can a Assyriologist tackle that sort of advanced technology? Fortunately, colleagues from the computer science, computational linguistics domain have an interest in working on algorithms to process data from cuneiform texts. The technology is ripe and accessible, and more experiments on ancient and low-resource languages show the potential of these types of explorations. To make a significant advance, multidisciplinary research groups need to form. The success of enterprises that will bring a true impact in the current context cannot be achieved by computer specialists or Assyriologists on their own. University of Toronto, University of California, Los Angeles, and the University of Frankfurt are involved in organizing an international research group of digitally inclined Assyriologists and specialists in computational linguistics for low-resource languages. Its main objective is the preparation of a methodology for the automated translation and information extraction of cuneiform languages. Note that Maria Sukareva from the University of Frankfurt is here today, and she can answer your more technical questions if you wish. Administrative texts make up the bulk of cuneiform inscriptions we have at our disposal to study ancient Mesopotamian cultures. However, they remain mostly untranslated, making them effectively inaccessible to anyone not having been trained to work with either the Sumerian and Akkadian language of a specific time period. Additionally, because of their homogeneity and formulaic nature, they are the group of documents on which it would be the most pertinent to apply statistical methods in order to infer information about society and economy. And this type of investigation is still in its infancy and focuses on small corpora that can be entirely processed manually. Pending funding, the Impact International team will prepare a methodology to address those gaps and will experiment on a corpus of 67,000 Sumerian texts dated to the 21st century BC, the Orthu period. This methodology will be reusable and adaptable to other corpora. Only a few experiments have been successfully conducted on cuneiform languages. It is possible to adapt existing neural and statistical algorithms that are tailored to other languages. For example, neural techniques to disambiguate Turkish morphology and statistical method for Quechua can be reused. For automated translation, both statistical machine translation and neural network-based machine translation will be tested on Sumerian transliteration and compared with results of Basque and Turkish samples. Of course, annotating the corpus is an essential step in the methodology in order to compensate for the size of the corpus. These techniques have been proven successful with different languages, including morphologically rich and ideosyllabic languages, just like Sumerians. There are evident obstacles to the unsupervised annotation and translation of cuneiform texts. For instance, words that have an unknown, uncertain meaning will weaken the translation output. But context appraisal will help clarify the meaning of such words. The results of automated translation will not reach the finesse of translations prepared by scholars, of course. The goal is not to produce beautiful translations, but to create a human-readable output that can be used by those outside the field to understand the overall semantics and particularities of the text. Translation will be accompanied by linguistic information, which will provide a supplemental aid to comprehension. Additionally, the CDLI will take the linked open data plunge. LUD will be an integral part of all future research projects at the CDLI. The first step will be linking textual information, integrating the open linguistic annotation ontologies, OLIA, with linguistic annotations, and semantic information from the text with widely used ontologies such as, for instance, Pleiad for places, Periodo for periods, Snapdragon for relationship between ancient people. In the second step, metadata will also be aligned, hopefully with the CDOC CRM, in collaboration with the ModRef French project. We also expect that the lexical data will participate in the linked open dictionary project. The goal of the LOT integration is to standardize results to permit interoperability with other projects as the most promising method to promote and reuse the aggregation of the CDI-created data. In order to extend even further the reuse of our work, new algorithms and generated data will be released to the public domain. Along with notions of access and reusability, preservation and sustainability should also be addressed, or at one point there might not be anything left to share. Preservation and sustainability have often been overlooked in early digital projects, but are now recognized as an essential part of the project's planning, as demonstrated by the requirements concerning these topics in Digital Humanities Project proposal for different American funding bodies. If the CDLI has been able to try for so long, it's in part due to the involvement of more than a few scholars in the initiative. Is complemented by measures taken to improve the potential longevity of the initiative and the preservation of its data. The CDLI's data bundles have been freely offered for download for a while. The catalog in FileMaker format, but now also in comma separated value format. Textual information, that is transliteration and translation, are also available in text format. All data are currently being pushed nightly to GitHub, and the next iteration of the CDLI software will be versioned throughout future development and maintenance using GitHub. Since its early years, the CDLI has had a mirror site in Berlin, and over the years has sought to extend its backup and mirroring networks to offer persistent service to users and to preserve copies of the data and interface in case of a disaster. Daily backups are running in Berlin at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science and at the University of Oxford. There is hope that this network can soon be extended to Canada through Compute Canada, supercomputing and storage service offered to Canadian researchers. In order to give a solid foundation to young research sub-projects, the CDLI Framework Update Project, or Phoenix, starting in September pending funding, has the following main objectives. First is to renew the full code base. So the website will be migrated to the PHP framework, which is robust, popular, and easy to learn. The automated tasks and more complex scripts will be migrated to Python in a custom library. Documentation will be written throughout the development process. All these steps are important to facilitate maintenance on the long term, including easing the task of graduate students in the humanities to code extensions themselves. The human interface will be redesigned to ensure that subsequent research endeavors in the at the CDLI can rely on a highly usable, accessible, and modulable platform, so new data can be easily analyzed, transformed, shared, and reused. Part of this implies conforming to the W3C standards and also the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. To conclude, the quantity of cuneiform text to process, coupled with the necessity of time-consuming operations by researchers in processing of cuneiform language, ask for the development of new methodologies. Using state-of-the-art algorithms for natural language processing of languages displaying similarities with cuneiform languages, and by exploiting statistical machine translation and neural network approaches, automated translation of the ancient Mesopotamian lower-source language can become an option. And this will open the door to non-specialists to exploit large cuneiform texts, large corpus texts that are currently mostly untranslated. Thank you, and I welcome your feedback.
Well, it really makes me happy to see the next generation here, in your case, graduate student, among others, showing us who's going to be doing what for generations over decades to come. So thank you for your presentation. I can say that, personally, one of the nicest things anyone's ever said about me was that they accused me of being a closet cuneiformist, which is, I wouldn't lay claim to that, but I studied these languages before you were born, and it was pretty archaic. And the reason I worked on Greek and Latin and did what I did with Perseus 3 decades ago was I've been working with Akkadian and Sumerian. And I had this model that you could know everything about your languages and be a master of everything. And you should only work on subjects where you could read everything at sight. And I had to edit my own texts of Akkadian and Sumerian texts for my dissertation because I was ended up doing some comparative work. And it was impossible. The logistics of the field were such that you simply couldn't work with it if you were not a specialist. And it was clear that if people were going to take full advantage of Akkadian, Sumerian, you would really need a different kind of infrastructure. And I can't tell you how happy it makes me to see the work happening in this field. I should say, global philology really starts with the conversation with Karen Ratner, Humboldt professor at Ludwig-Maximilian University in Munich, about how we really need to work together between Assyriology and classics and other disciplines. So it's great. And this is this CDLI has been going on for 20 years. So it gets the honor roll of projects that have gone on with funding, without funding, when people were crawling on hands over glass with nothing, when they were well supported. And it is going to face a challenge when Bob, I guess, is going to retire and told me next year. What do we do? How do we maintain this? How do we maintain any of these projects? Because sooner or later we all retire, and more than retire, a little bit later after that. So, questions before we go to Bob?
I have just a question, quick comment, I guess, more than anything. You talked about in the middle of the presentation about forming the international group of cuneiformists that can yep. work together to and it sounds to me very much like what Karen Radner was trying to do with ancient Near Eastern in Germany, of getting ancient Near Eastern scholars together to have a sort of a united front and also to communicate with each other. So it might be interesting to, especially since you have already some people at the University of Frankfurt, so here in Germany, it might be interesting to interface at some level with them as well. So, and perhaps you've done that already. I'm not sure.
We're not having their conversation about this project, but of course we will have to discuss these topics further.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, yes.
Thank you for your presentation. Did your database include the algorithmic,
There's just a couple of texts right now, but there's a French scholar called Vanessa Gelou who is preparing some edited part of Anatou of Ugarit. But no, the main major texts in the database are mostly Sumerian and Akkadian texts.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
As far as what we want to do next.
Wait. First, we'll be next. We gotta ask a question, logistics. Very important question, dinner time.
Yeah, good.
So the plan is for dinner, we're going to gather downstairs on the 4th floor, right, basically right below us here, before up to where we have a room. And we're going to get pizza and what we call, delicately referred to in this country as Brötchen, which are German sandwiches. And so the idea is to have people normally eat together and chat and sort of relax, where you can go off and have drinks afterwards. But who would like us to order you pizza or German sandwiches? And if you want something else, feel free to bring it up. I recommend you should go over to the little stall set up next to the ice skating rink, where they have some nice typical German things that you could bring up also. They're not very expensive. But hands, how many hands for pizza? One hand. 2 hands, okay. All right. And I want you to double verify on this. We have 2 people for pizza, so.
2 people. All right.
All right.
The rest of you are out of luck.
Anyone interested in sandwiches?
Did you mention that they don't have to pay for this?
This is pay for this.
Yeah, this is basically free pizza or free sandwiches. That would be paid for by the Institute for Angewandte Informatik. So, anybody else now? Does anybody want to change their vote about pizza?
How's that? All right, so we got 4 hands for pizza. All right, how about German sandwiches? We got more for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so any more? 6, 7. Okay, we have 7 for German sandwiches and 4 for pizza.
Okay.
It's weird German, man. It's like, I understand the food is better, all the, if you go to TripAdvisor and ask for the top restaurants in any German city, the top one is never German. And it's either Italian or Japanese or something not German.
Yeah.
That's Germans evaluating their own food. I recommend you go get Schweinehaxe or something at the and bring it out here. So there will be belegtes Brötchen and pizza at 402. I'll lean them forward to 1 floor below us at 7 o'clock for those of you who care to join us. If you want to bring your own food, bring Chinese food or something else, bring it along. Okay.
Okay. What I wanted to say was basically our coffee break starts in 25 minutes. So what we might want to actually do is to do our last presentation of the day, which was supposed to be after the coffee break, Vincent and Stefan. And then we basically have all the presentations done. Then we can have a coffee break and we can come back for a longer, perhaps a longer discussion afterwards. So, because I don't think there's going to be coffee outside for the next in 25 minutes. That's probably the best way to go, and then we can get that done. If that's okay with you two, first of all, if that's fine, and if nobody else So
I think that sounds like a plan.
yeah, so, and that will give us some time to bring everything together and talk about, and have a longer conversation, I think, and maybe knock off a little bit further.
Right.
All right, I think everything should basically be set up. We just need to change the title. Oops. Yeah. We can just change this. Okay. I want to make sure that when it starts, that it shows up correctly. So just.
It's okay.
Oh, wait. Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. Looks good.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. We hope to keep you awake for a while before the coffee break with some entertaining ancient Egyptian material. And so the goal today is to give a bit of an overview of what has been done in the field, and we are gonna zoom out from the very issue of encoding hieroglyphic signs up to the level of the digital corpora, and then to the interchange format, the linked open data issues, and the data model that we use for encoding our corpora. So first, the encoding a complex writing system, and I'm going to talk a bit about the hieroglyphic sign list, some paleographical project, the Unicode issue, and what we have as far as OCR is concerned for the hieroglyphic script. So first, it might be interesting to stress that we do not have a stable sign list for ancient Egyptian. This means that we have several printed sign lists with a description of the sign function, but barely any sign list describing the shape of the sign themselves, and they're all kind of outdated. And additionally, we have a lot of unpublished material, which is now progressively made available on the web. A good example is the Berlin sign list, which was prepared for the Wörterbuch and was planned as a supplementary to this dictionary, as a dictionary of spelling. It's now available online, and it's full of material about signs that are not compiled in any modern sign list. You see how it looks now, but it's been put online. And in this description of signs, you have a lot of information that are not available to scholars otherwise. You also have a list compiled by very famous names in Egyptology, like Ornung and Schenkel, with a description of the function and of the various shapes of the sign that you find in the Egyptian text, but this is not included in the sign list used nowadays. So we are in the process of building a new sign list now, based on a proposal that I made with Serge Rosemorduc and in collaboration with the Academy in Berlin. And we recently suggested in a meeting in Cambridge a UML model for articulating the sign list and structuring it. The most crucial point maybe is the fact that when you suggest a function, or you need to reference everything based on corpus data. And so this is the goal of this ongoing project between Berlin and Liège. And we plan to make it available as linked open data for the corpora and other paleographical projects. And of course, there are so many signs and so many variations in shapes that at some point when we will reach a stable state of the sign list, we want to make it collaborative in order for people to be able to enlarge this sign list as we saw a bit earlier, but in a different field for Chinese. And of course, you have big projects in Germany like the AKU project about the altägyptische Kursivschriften in ancient Egypt. And the goal is to analyze the evolution of the cursive writing system over the entire history of ancient Egyptian. And it's just starting, but it's for 23 years. And the issue for them is that they want to document, of course, the evolution of the cursive script, but let's say they do not have a proper description of the capital system to which they could refer. So we really need to work hands in hands in order for them to be able to refer to stable kind of to stable hieroglyphs while they're describing the evolution of the cursive system. Of course, this lack of hieroglyphic sign list is problematic because at the moment in Unicode we only have a very restricted set of hieroglyphs encoded, which means that when you're implementing Unicode, you actually have access only to a bit more than 1,000 signs, whereas we know that there are more than 10,000 signs out there. And so despite the effort, and So is there in the room, so he developed this wonderful tool for encoding text in Unicode, but it is limited due to the limitation of the sign list available nowadays in Unicode. And as scholars, we do not want plenty of signs to be added in Unicode without knowing what are their shape, what are their function. So in a way, we see the third sign list as a preliminary step before we can add all of these glyphs in Unicode. And another big issue with Unicode is the fact that you have some kind of recursivity in the ancient Egyptian writing system, meaning that you can embed unit into units, and it's not really easy to implement in OpenType and in OpenType fonts. Sorry, and so there are heated discussion about the Unicode committee in order to know what is the best option in terms of control character for positioning the hieroglyphs with respect to one another. It seems that it's going in the good direction and that they found a solution to this technological issue recently. But of course, if it turns out that you cannot position with control character in Unicode the signs with respect to one another, then you need to add many more signs which are combined signs in Unicode. If you can actually combine them with a few operators, then you need much less signs in Unicode. So the whole process depends of the implementation or not of these control characters. As for OCR, a very good proof of concept has been made by Markian Nedorf on handwritten transcription of hieroglyphic text. Of course, it's very difficult to do OCR on pictures of monumental text, but when it comes to the full edition of many texts from the same period in the same end, then we can do a lot of progress, and we still really need for the corpora, about which I'm talking in a second, we still need a lot of text to be added. So what do we have in terms of corpus and digital edition? First, we have basic digital edition, which are static, so to say. So you have the text transliterated, and the link to the pictures, some transliteration in hieroglyphs, and translation, plus some other useful tool. This is the Darrell Medina Online, publishing many ostraka from this famous site of ancient Egypt. And you have other projects like the Karnak project, encoding all the text from this famous temple. There are several thousands. And of course, because they're working there, they're directly documenting the wall with very detailed pictures and transcribing the hieroglyphs and transliterating them. But it's kind of a basic online publication of the material. In a way, it's more handy than a book because you can navigate within the data and search for a specific thing. But it's not really what one could call an annotated corpus. Of course, you have a lot of meta information like bibliographical references and stuff like this. As far as the proper annotated corpora are concerned, I'm going to talk about the three main projects nowadays in Egyptology, namely the Thesaurus Linguae Egyptiae in Berlin, Ramses Online, developed in Liège, and the Karnak Cachette, developed by Laurent Coulon with the help of Vincent in Paris. So the first project is the famous Thesaurus Linguae Egyptiae, and it's a publication platform that was made available on the net by the Berlin Brandenburg Academy. and the first release for general use was in October 2004, and they have the biggest corpus available nowadays for the whole ancient Egyptian history, with 1,400,000 occurrences, and it ranges from the earliest period, Old Egyptian and Pyramid texts, down to the Ptolemaic times and some demonic texts. What you have there is a lemmatized corpora with a morphological annotation of the text material, allowing for specific lexical, philological, linguistic, and so on research. But of course, when the project started in 2004, it was still a challenge to encode hieroglyphs. And it's only recently, as we will see, that the philosophy changed, and that the Academy is now adding systematically the hieroglyphs to the transliteration, which was only in Latin-like alphabet before. Of course, each token is linked to an entry in the lemma list, and the text and document are described by rich metadata. We'll come back to this issue a bit later. And as I said, recently a new software for annotating the text has been developed by the Academy, and is now used in order to for the new text inputted in the database to be accompanied by hieroglyphs, and to enrich the older text with hieroglyphic spelling. We can now turn to Ramses Online. So Ramses Online is much more limited in scope. Ramses Online comes out of the Ramses project, and the goal is to build a richly annotated corpus just of the late Egyptian text. So to put it bluntly, it's just the text from the Middle Kingdom. So this period that you have on the screen, and these texts are written either in hieroglyphs or in the cursive hieratic script. And the goal when the project started was to for the corpus to be useful both for philologists and linguists. And for this, we developed a Java software with text stored in XML, and it's a lexicon editor in which the hieroglyphic script is fully taken into account, and in which we can lemmatize and annotate morphologically all the tokens of the text. So what kind of data do we have? We have the hieroglyphic spellings, lemmatization and morphological annotation. We have information about textual criticism. I mean, these are not very precise. These are not indication at the sign level. It's at the token level. But this was in order not to create too many different spelling in the database and to keep this information just in order to draw the attention of the scholar. Please go and look in the text. This word is actually not complete. And we, of course, have a translation of all the text encoded in French and in English. Besides this editor, we have what we call the syntax editor, which is, so to say, theory neutral, which means that we annotate blocks and units, and we define, thanks to what we call the syntax language description, we define a syntax for analyzing text. Here, it's a basic syntactic analysis of a sentence, but this tool is also used nowadays by a project led by Camilla Di Biase-Dyson in Göttingen for annotating metaphor, because you can define a grammar, so to say, a syntax for annotating a metaphor co-reference in a single text, which means that with this tool, we can add as many layers of annotation to a text, and it's very handy because it's directly integrated with the data of Ramses, which means that all the information about the lemma, about the part of speech annotation, about the morphological analysis are available in the syntax editor. And you can create rules allowing you to do some grouping or not, depending on the type of group that you want to add in a sentence. So yeah, this is also used for metaphor analysis, and this project started in 2006, and all the people you see on the screen have been collaborating on this project. And actually, the number of texts nowadays is nearly 5,000. and we just got a new PhD student for annotating the text in the database. So we hope that it will again raise up in terms of speed of encoding. And as you see, the number of tokens is a bit more than 500,000. It seems not much when compared to even the classical languages, and it seems like nothing when compared to modern languages as a corpus. But we, of course, have to encode every single spelling by hand, and to analyze everything, we have no parser, no tagger, nothing available, so that this is all inputted by hand. And so we can also expect the quality of the data to be quite good. And on the other hand, we estimate that this covers more than 90% of the hieratic documentation for the period we want to cover. So it's pretty comprehensive despite the low figure. And it's now available online. And we have a responsive website based on Bootstrap. And we have powerful linguistic searching capabilities because this was designed as a linguistic corpus in the first place. So for example, here you're looking for definite relative clause with some hieroglyph in it, and a verb which also includes some hieroglyphs. You can combine the unit as much as you wish, and you'll get the answer. So it's quite good for linguistic searches. It's in interaction with the user, which means that we keep on amending the data within the database, but we have a stable ID. So it means we have legacy URL, and if you want to quote the text at some point, you quote it, and you can get it on the website even 3 years later. Even if the text has been completely changed, at least the text as you quoted it remains as such in the database and is acceptable and is accessible online. Finally, you can also, when you're a registered user, you can also comment on every single sentence in order to let us know, listen, there is a problem here, this is not the right hieroglyph, or your analysis sucks for this passage, so please amend it. And finally, it's fully glossed and translated. And I want here to come back to what Usama said yesterday, because half of the MA students who register for using this database are actually Egyptian MA students. And it's not the same for the higher academic level, but for people giving us, telling us like, I'm a MA, or I'm a PhD, or I'm a postdoc student. I mean, half of the MA students are from Egypt, and it means that it's actually helpful to have this kind of corpus glossed and fully translated online. The Cachet Karnak, no. The goal is to put online all the texts that are on the statues here found by Georges Legrand in the famous cachet in the temple of Karnak, which I was mentioning earlier in this talk. And nowadays we have already a full description with all the bibliographical information available for each statue online. And we have also online all the pictures available for these statues. But as you see on the right-hand side, you also have a lot of text on these statues. And so the goal is to create a text corpus which would be interoperable with other digital corpora and take into account of course, in this case, very crucial relationship between text and object. And the main focus of the project when it was launched was prosopographical data, because of course on these statues you find a lot of names, of titles, of filiations and functions. And so you can, with all these statues, if you connect them, you can build up all family trees and relationship in the Theban region of the time. And Vincent designed for this XML editor for ancient Egyptian epigraphy, which is a user-friendly interface for TI epidoc encoding in a Java application. And it looks like this. And you can here easily annotate a lot of information, especially about anthroponyms and titles and function, as you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Here, you can even, once you've identified the people and their function, you can encode the family relationship within the interface, and you have directly the text available in TEI compliant format. And of course, then you can export the text in this very form. Now, when it comes to the alignment of parallel text, I have to say that as for now, we do not have in Egyptology the practice of producing critical editions, which means that when we create annotated corpora, like for the TLA or Ramses, if we encode a text, we encode all the witnesses of a text. But we are far from putting together critical edition. And so this is really a challenge ahead and something for which we would need a tool. And I'm just going to try to explain the kind of challenge that we have in this field. Unfortunately, Daniel Verning and Elisa Sofia Linker were unable to make it today. But I want to mention the Rosetta Stone online project, because what they did is really some kind of proof of concept or test of alignment of text from ancient Egypt. Of course, the corpus is very specific because they work on the multilingual Ptolemaic decrees, where you have hieroglyphic script, Demotic, and ancient Greek. Of course, Demotic and ancient and hieroglyphic Egyptian are the same language, but from different period, whereas Greek is a completely different language. So the natural level of alignment for such text would be the meaningful unit of the sentence. It's difficult to align things at another level. And the way the website is built is very ergonomic, because you can choose, as you see on top, which level of annotation you want to visualize or not on the screen. Then Nederoff made an experiment for aligning automatically a hieroglyphic text and its transliteration based on some values that you have identified for the hieroglyphic text. And it works very well. But usually what we would have to do is to align such text. So here I just give you a small page of the first sentence of a literary text called The Satire of the Trades. And you see how many witnesses and how lacunary there are. And we would need, of course, to align these texts at the level of the word, ideally. But of course, we have very many lacunary witnesses. And for me, this is a challenge, even more so for other literary texts, when you have different versions of the same text in different stages of the language. And then if you do not tell in advance to the computer, well, this belongs to the same stage, please align at the word level. And because it all looks the same in this synoptic edition, so I mean, we really would need a powerful tool in order to process all the data we have annotated so far. And we did not get to this point yet. And now I'm giving the floor to Vincent for the bigger picture about all the metadata and data model that we use in our field.
Yeah. The idea in the few remaining minutes is to give an overview of what strategy the people dealing with these corpus put in place in order to make all this project more interoperable. One first things we started to work on a few years ago. We presented something at the TI conference in Lyon in 2015, so 2.5 years ago. It's a TI Epidoc specification for ancient Egyptian text. It's here. I wanted to change the typo. It's not a lapsus. Huh? It's not. There is no pain in what we are doing in our work. But it's so this group of people work together in order to define and to find in the TI which element could be used in order to be able to share all the data. The idea was to go back to the document. I don't know if it's very specific to Egyptology or it's maybe more than for classical studies, but our texts are really embedded into artifactual things and artifacts. And for us, it's very important to keep track of the very precise location of text. It's, of course, the provenance, it's from this temple or this place, this archaeological site. But we do have also important information in terms of location on the monument itself. And the position of the location of a text on a monument is also meaningful. For instance, on a statue like this, for instance, you will see that maybe on the right side is mentioned this deity, and on the other side another one, because it was put somewhere in the temple and just reflecting the theological system of the temple. So the idea was to start from really the object itself and to find a way to encapsulate all the data we need to have in order to fully document a text, an epigraphical text. So there is, and the fact is TI, which is more a toolkit than other thing, something else, contains a lot of elements that are matching the needs. So it's possible in TI to say, oh, there is an ideal document which is not existing anymore, but we can say, yeah, there is this concept of statue of ore now kept in the museum. And it goes with the artifactual object, the object itself, which is really kept in a museum. And we are also able to model the surfaces where the text will take place, the writing support. We are also then able to model to say, yes, we have this text, this bits of text here, and so here it's highlighted in green, and we also have this iconic or these images, these figures, which are depicted on the statue, and of course, text are linked to the figures. Some text at the top are referring to, for instance, the god Amun, who is in the middle. So we have to say, oh, this text goes with this figure. And I think it's something very important. And of course, we have the text itself that we can encode in a TI way. And what was also important for us was to be able to make links to more abstract text. So for instance, to say this text is this kind of text, or is an instance of something known elsewhere. And here it's maybe not for statues and that, but for papyri, for sure, we do need, and we still need to have a kind of CTS system so that we can refer to specific texts. This material is available online on the top project. We set up a page on our website where you can already have it's just beta version, some Relax NG schemas, as well as a DTD and a maximal template, which gives some example how you can use this TI file. When we worked on this, and of course it was a question behind for a long time, but when we really started to work on the TI file, we realized how it was important to be able to take into account all the kind of metadata TI files allows to encode. And this is a list of all the kind of metadata we should be able to implement in our file. So this leads me to talk now about metadata for sharing ancient Egyptian resources. Basically, projects are dealing with the same material, the same kind of data and metadata. that is to say, the object and the text, which are written on them. But, and Stefan showed that before me, because of difference of methodology, of research question, of course, each project developed their own system. And it was really the case also for metadata enrichment. And so if we are not pointing to the same metadata, we will not be able to compare our material. So the idea was to set up a project. These are the kind of metadata we have to deal with. So about object type, material, preservation state types, for instance. We have to deal with text, text types. What are the canonical texts we could refer to? The language types, we need very precise list of entries for all this. There are a big issue of space and time, how to add metadata about space, location, provenance, and also time. And of course, the way texts are maybe encoded. There are some resources about for that currently for metadata. The current resources are a bit are very different and not very consistent. There is a MAT, the Multilingual Egyptological Thesaurus, which is a print thing published in 1988. And there is no official digital version of that. And it's a bit outdated because it's nearly 30 years old now. There is, of course, some databases with metadata, the Del Medine database, Trismegistos, by Daniel Verling, the Tabib, and the OIB. So a lot of things. So the top project is was set up, and it's an emanation actually of two workshops held in Liège and in Berlin in 2015. And the idea is to compile and curate the data gathered so far by the partners of the different projects. It's the way the aim is to extend and consolidate the content, building on existing material, and very importantly, using the current best practices in theory development. And of course, following the recommendation of an approach of the web, semantic web, and linked open data. So what I developed is a Java application to create the concept in the thesaurus. This is another application. It's open source. Well, there is no link to that, but it's open source, and of course, I would be happy to work, or that some work could be done so that this software could be used. The fact is I tried other software, but I couldn't find any software that was matching all my requirements. The data is so created through the software and pushed online on an ExistDB database, which as you know, probably with ExistDB, you can put your data as XML files, and then you have on the other part of the system all the things to have a website. So a bootstrap website also, not very well responsive now. If you try on a phone, iPhone or tablet, it's not very well, but it's really a question of CSS thing. The idea is, so this matches the ISO standard for thesaurus. That is to say, for each concept in this thesaurus, we are giving preferred terms, alternative terms. You should have also a scope note so that we are sure that we are talking about this concept and not another one. We will do references to broader narrower term, to have an hierarchical tree. And also we'll make references, cross-references to other related concepts. The idea is to be multilingual. For the moment, English, French, and German are fully implemented. Arabic is planned, but we do need some help for that. I've contacted some friends and colleagues in Egypt, but it's difficult to set up something easy in order to have the Arabic implemented in this system. But for sure, this is something we want to have, is to have Arabic. Another pseudo language is added is the XML. It's called XML language. You have that here. It's not very clear on the screen, but we are also giving what should be used as XML value when you are, for instance, doing a TI file. As you know, if you are using a value as an attribute, you can't have a comma, you can't have accent, maybe you can have space, things like that. So we are here providing, if you want to say, make a reference to this concept, please use this string of characters. So we also have some specific data, for instance, when it's about the thesaurus of periods. So you have all the kings, all the dynasties, all the kings, and we are providing time ranges for each king. To the contrary, to periodo, we are making a statement that new kingdom, we have a concept of new kingdom, and we say in this for hers, with this reference at the back, we say new kingdom is from this to this time. And you know, periodo is a kind of gazetteer, so you will have maybe 5 new kingdom entries. Here, there is only 1 new kingdom entry. In the future, we'll have maybe several date ranges because according to scholars, it can differ. But we have only 1 concept, new kingdom or something like that. So it's in SCOS mainly, with some other space name entities. So we are using periodo for and also time ontology and TI. And just quickly for still the metadata issues, we do have a very, and it recalls a talk yesterday by Osama also, this geographical issue. We want to make a clear distinction. As I said, we need to find granularity that makes possible to reference precise locations. So sites, monuments, but also part of monuments and part of walls and things like that. So we need a system for that. We need also to make a clear distinction between ancient and modern places. So Tel El Balamun is not Payou-Enimen. Tel El Balamun in the north of the delta is a modern archaeological site. Okay, it keeps the ruins or the monuments of Payou-Enimen with the name of the ancient town, but it's for hers, it's not the same concept. So we need something that is able to do that. Because ancient places have to be bound to occurrences of place names in text. This is one thing. And modern places have to be bound to, for instance, provenance or a current location of a monument. So for that, of course, there are 2 main resources: Trismegistos place. But I believe, of course, I'm saying that because I am the author of the second resource, but I believe Trismegistos is not the model behind Trismegistos is not here, and it's not possible at the current time to refer to these correct places as I just mentioned. The other project is the TOPBib, the topographical bibliography, which is a digital version of a 8 volumes book, which is basically a description of Egypt with bibliographical reference. So if you want to know something about the Temple of Edfu, you open the volume 6, the page about Edfu. You know that there is a first court. In this first court, you have this wall. On this wall, you have this kind of scene, and you can have information in this book published in 1933. So the digital Tabib is an online version of that. There is more than 5,000 pages to be digitized. And the idea is to provide URIs for all modern sites. And so in the near future, hopefully, to the content of the site. So to the sub-site monuments, artifacts, part of monuments, and so forth. So here you have an idea of the new version. So this Telfahaun site. Below, at the bottom of the page, you have the old print version, and at the top, how it looks like now. You can have a look also directly on the web. The idea is, with a top lib number, you can refer specifically to a part of to a site. You have Tunai Gable 49030. You can also refer to a specific part of the site, so the number will be a bit longer, and so forth, even up to the monument in a site. To finish very quickly, what we think also, which is very important for us, is to have clear data model that are the backbone of what we are doing. And so I think, or it's mainly Stefan, maybe, because I was not involved with Liège at that time, but started to work on that in 2006, and to first for the Ramses project to define a generic data model that will be able to encapsulate or all the data he was dealing with. This was expanded more recently. We published at the end of last year this data model, which tries to say where kind of information can be put. It's an abstract view of that. It's not an implementation, but we are saying that we have these classes. So an object, the document, the witness, and the text, and all this goes into this system. I will not go into detail because I'm running out of time. But what I wanted to say is this is a basic data model we published recently in December. Even before it was published, an extension was made about text content. So here, basically, how can we use this model in order to model intertextual relationships between text, the content of text, and how you split the question of content and abstract content and physical content. And then something I presented in January here in Leipzig, an extension about places and how places can be bound between a place name that is mentioned in a text, in a witness, and places inferred by the location of the document or of the provenance of the document. So all this data model is really in the perspective of enabling a fully interoperable system where all these projects that are doing stuff in separate ways can then bring all together, and in order to bring all together and talk to each other. And I think, yeah, it's finished. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, our coffee is waiting outside, but if there are some quick questions that some people want to ask, then we can take those. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that the coffee is waiting outside.
Well, we can take questions.
Exactly. So you can actually speak to these two. They're both very nice. They probably won't bite you, and so you can talk to them during the.
If I've got some coffee, yeah.
It's not coffee, right?
And Bolson is getting global philology travel points. You have to set up a special loyalty.
Okay, good. Then let's take our coffee break. This thing will do 20 minutes, so from now until 4:20, and then we'll come back here and have our closing discussion for the day at that point. Okay.
And to make it somehow, especially if you have dinners. If it was filtering that,
Yeah,
24 euros are short.
yeah,
They're just on top.
yeah. But that's what, so no. Yeah, okay, good. Excellent.
But, so, if you're interested.
And I think that the big themes are really two kinds of things we have to deal with. And the first, I would say, is scale. And this doesn't affect everybody in the same way, but I give here this screen. This is a query for books in German in the German Digital Library that have been scanned. And I come up scanned and printed 1500 to 1800. So if you go beyond 1800, you have a lot more. But this is what the DFG is going to test OCR resources on. Resources to improve the OCR. And you have 270,000 books. Now, 270,000 books is not the, 10 million titles the Hockey Trust has digitized. It's not the 3 million books you can download from archive.org. But I don't think any of us has read 270,000 books. It is impossible to work with some categories of data, at scale that are now available to us. And if you just look randomly, what comes up, new collections of cool stuff for wound art doctors. I bet that's fun. And small publications of the Leipzig Economic Society from the 18th century. And a collection of particularly interesting trips in the Orient in 1792. So what would you do trying to understand intellectual history at scale? And this is, the 270,000 books is one thing. 10 million words is more words than you can reflect upon readily. I mean, if you work on a heavily studied text, it's going to be a few thousand. Dan, how many words of Catullus are there? 5,000?
It's 2,300 lines, so probably 15,000.
10,000, 15,000. So fair amount, but a lot by one stand. If you're looking at thinking about every problem of every word, it's a lot of stuff. If you're thinking about, a billion, how many words this is a lot. Latin for ancient languages, 241,000 books, almost as much Latin as there is German. So these are two examples of where you have more stuff, more data than you can work with. But again, you may have 300 manuscripts of one text, which you can't possibly look at carefully in your lifetime, or you may have some other kind of complication. So scale is one major thread, and we have a lot of methods to deal with this, but ultimately you end up down on the ground, and you're looking at something like one of my favorite books. This is the Linguarum Orientalium Turcicae, Arabicae, Persicae Institutiones, so Grammatica Turcica, in qua orthographia, etymologia, syntaxis, procedia, et reliquia, blah, blah. Basically, it's a summary grammar of Arabic, Ottoman, Turkish, and Persian. It is printed in Vienna. Here it says 1680. Another copy I have is 1681. It's printed in Vienna in the same year as plague kills a third of the population. And 3 years before the last Ottoman army besieges Vienna itself. And you have this dramatic confrontation. And in this Latin grammar, you have the first that we've discovered European or translation of Persian poetry, at least of the Persian poetry of Hafez, into a European language. Here is a Persian text. Let's see if I can zoom in here a little bit. And zoom.
And I really like this because, okay, you have the vocalized Persian. So if you happen to read an Arabic type script, you can read this. And then you have the question of what do you do with this? And already in the 17th century, and it's not the or 18th century, and people have done this before, but this is one example. You get a transliteration. So in case you can't read the Arabic, here's what it sounds like. And then down here, you get a translation. And then if you go further, whoops, to the next page, we will get down into linguistic annotation of every word in the poem, and we also have a description of the meter and how it works. So it is an exhaustive, richly annotated text addressing by manual means the challenge of saying, okay, here's a poem, here's a document for you. We found it, and it's in a language you don't know. What next? And to me, this is another area where we are able to have an impact. And we've seen a lot of examples of that. I hope you'll forgive me if I show off a local one. One method of trying to get at this, and this is work by Mariam Faradi and Tariq Youssef. Is Tariq here? Yeah, well, there you are. And just one way of visualizing alignments. This is a Persian, this is a poem by Hafez. This is an English translation. This is a German translation. Here you have word alignments, and you can do things like study the aggregated alignments and see what words in English are translated as bird. What Persian words correspond to the English word bird, get a distribution, and then you could go off and see all the instances and see, what this actually means. And the actual alignments allow you to see at a glance. The red are words that don't have a correspondence in the Persian. So this is, at one level, a very traditional thing we've had forever, but we've never been able to trace word alignments like this and then dynamically explore the semantics. And I don't want to say that Tariq has done everything you possibly can do. I don't think he would say that. The point is that this is different. It's a different relationship to the text. And this is one model. You put this together with the morphology and the syntax that we've seen, and you really can start to work with anything. So we've seen a bunch of languages. We've seen ancient languages. We've seen contemporary languages, medieval languages. We've seen what I would think to be convergent approaches. We've seen complementary approaches. So I would say one approach is, you're dealing with vast data at scale, more than you can carefully analyze. The other is you're taking a small amount of data and analyzing it intensively. And these are things which reinforce each other and are both needed in a full ecology of intellectual life. One of the things we need to think about, and we don't have to come to any conclusions today, but I'm going to ask you is, we need to see where there are pragmatic points of collaboration or action, where you can say, there's this effort in here, there's this effort there, there's another effort there. If we put them together and invest some effort, we expand here, we connect this, whatever, we can do things we couldn't do before. Now, some things, it might well be, for example, taking other languages and making them available like this, or it might be taking other services that other people have built and applying them to these linguistic databases. I think we need to think about, on the one hand, traditional questions that we would like to do better. I'm really interested myself in the degree to which the use of linguistic annotation to represent patterns that we can't find by doing word searches could change, for example, the way we think about textual editing. So if you're editing a text and you're trying to decide one variant or another, to what extent we can see different patterns or trace patterns that would be invisible with traditional terms. Francesco Mambrini has worked on that. He just had to leave for Berlin. But Giuseppe Celano has thought about that quite a bit. And we heard a really brilliant paper by Chris Blackwell, who's now in the back of the room. So that is a thread. Really new ways of exploring patterns in language. We have sort of content questions. So I'm watching the last presentation of Egyptology, and before that we have Assyriology, and we have, or digital Assyriology, or, well, digital, whatever it is that we can include Hittite in, so we don't exclude the Hittitologists. And we have Greek and Latin, and we have, and actually cuneiform languages, so we want Old Persian too, for example. What are the ways to think about the ancient world, at least from the Eastern Mediterranean to the Hindu Kush, in ways that we couldn't think of before? We have pre-modern Chinese. We can think about what's going on in China and what's going on in the Mediterranean space. Clearly some kind of back and forth interaction, but there's also things happening in parallel. We've heard about materials in Georgian and Armenian that appear in the late ancient world, as we think about it, as we periodize it, or tend to periodize it in Europe and North America. We've heard about epics and translations that are not widely known. We'd like to get them more studied. We'd like to change the canon of what people think about, not just in the English-speaking world, but elsewhere. We'll be hearing about Greek and Latin in Brazil, and in Brazilian Portuguese tomorrow. Again, here we have exchanges across modern languages. We have had presentations from speakers not only of Georgian and Armenian, but of Russian and of Arabic. And of French and of Italian and of the usual European languages, but other languages as well. How do we increase the exchanges across these communities? So these are just some of the threads, some of the themes, and I kicked them out there to start discussion. What are your thoughts? What are some of the things that you see as potential targets of opportunity, things that we might do, not knowing we're not going to be exclusive, but just trying to start this conversation, knowing we're not going to end anything? Yes, Cliff.
I'll throw in one thing that struck me after, we talked about the microkernel, sort of visualizing the kinds of services as microservices in a machine model. And thinking in terms of, was it? Yes. So that struck me as not only a metaphor, but actually a model for this. And I got myself thinking, what would it take for us to think deeply about what that actually means? What does it mean to put together the microkernel? And what does it mean then to extend that to this services level? So it occurred to me today, one of the things we can do is we see a lot of variance on a set of services. And we could probably begin to identify what that set of services is. And if we could begin to think about the properties of those services, we might be at a point where we can come up with a way of services negotiating with one another to align themselves. So no service has to provide everything, but if it can respond to queries about what it can do, something can assemble those to make them talk to one another in a way that various communications protocols work to establish the common denominator.
I just to give an example of that. Tomorrow, Patrick Burns will spend his time talking about an application of what is called the Classical Language Toolkit, which is kind of a generalization of the natural language toolkit, which is a commonly used set of standard services for analyzing modern languages. And so one of the things we've seen is that multiple projects are dealing with, everybody has corpora, everybody has also connections now to high resolution, high definition representations of physical objects, which can be high resolution scans of books or manuscripts, or they can be more complex representations of 3D objects. It's flat, but we're able now to connect our corpora and our transcriptions to representations of the written objects that are fundamental. But we also have a bunch of a pipeline. And do we have here, where's the best way to see a list of the pipeline? Patrick? What's
what kind of pipeline do you want? Just
here we are. Okay, so this is typical information retrieval, lemmatization, take an inflected form, turn it into a dictionary form. Not such a big deal in Chinese or even English. You don't get very far in Greek or Georgian if you can't do this, when you have complicated languages. Named entity recognition. The names for people, places, organizations, groups of any kind. Everybody has named entities, as far as I can tell. And how do you analyze them at scale? How do you represent them? How do you represent cultural formats, ways of thinking about names, named entities? Space, obviously, is one that is fundamentally different in the brains of pre-modern people. Even in 1830, I read a few years ago an autobiography of a person who became a preacher in New Haven. He went to Yale from Boston and he walked. He couldn't afford a horse. So his conception of space is different from our conception of space. How do you capture that in the text? We have to deal with things like normalization. That might go ahead of named entity identification if I were doing this. So you have different ways of writing the same thing. And you need to be able to think about preserving where you want variation, but also being able to say these different spellings are equivalent in some way, so you can find them. We have part of speech tagging, which I think everybody tends to have nouns. Most languages, many in this room have nouns and verbs. We have thousands of languages still that survive, so some of them probably are conceptualized differently. Prosody, meter. This is the thing we've been really bad at. We haven't done much of anything in my group in representing meter. But again, you've got to think about it. Sentence tokenization, harder than it looks, as we heard from Matteo. Stop word filtering, text cleanup, which is essential. You may build a big corpus and say, well, we got 100 million words. We got to produce 100 million words. It's not going to be perfect, but you've got to have in place a mechanism for that material to be improved over time. Macronizer, lemmatization. Okay, so Latin, all right, skipped. Stop word, text cleanup, indices, and so on. So here are, and then we have a bunch of services now done by language. We have a bunch of languages. How many languages does the classical language toolkit? Is there a number, Patrick?
I can probably draw like 15 or 16 that have any tool spills. Latin and Greek are the furthest along. Sanskrit's coming along. To work on that. And I would gladly work with anyone in this room to introduce more of what Crowder calls the WARC, the Basic Language Resource Kits. We want to develop one of those for all of the historical languages. So, can I add one thing on the CLTK real quick?
Yeah.
So natural language processing is is doing great in English and other modern languages where there's a huge profit motive, right? So like all these things, like the natural language toolkit and Spacey, all the other products that are available will do a fantastic job on English, and then you can apply them to your languages. What's gonna happen real quick, what you'll notice is that you get to these language-specific problems. What I really noticed is working with Latin is that in critics, I really need to have a way of handling it, right? So what I was able to do is I built a tokenizer that can handle Latin critics. And you just get better results over time because of your specific language domain knowledge, right? So the technical problems are not that they're solved, but they're out there. But what we have is domain knowledge, we have language knowledge that is so important for what we do. And we can start bringing those together. And that's one of the main goals of the Classical Language Toolkit, is to provide a space for figuring out where these mass market NLP products are most designed for English or Arabic, Chinese, like modern languages are producing millions of words an hour, not in the course of their existence. But a space for us to have language-specific knowledge in one space. So that's sort of where the CLTK started and what we're trying to foster.
So I think we've got, we should think about what your services are that you might need for your work. We also need to think about practical issues. We have a lot of work that's very far along in different languages. So you have a great deal of work in various forms of Egyptian, a great deal of work in pre-modern Chinese. We have a lot of work in Greek and Latin. We have a lot of work being done at the national level, contemporary corpora of Georgian, for example, to support the study of that language. How do we connect these different threads so that people, the actual scholars or readers, are able to ask questions that they care about and not have to worry about what collection they're talking to? You want to, there's a tendency for those of us who build collections to want to make our collections really visible and make it clear, you're here with us, this is our collection, is wonderful. Nobody cares about our collections except us. Most people care about, they want to study processes cutting across Egypt, the Near East, and Greece, for example, which they've never been able to do before. How do they make this happen? They want to be able to look at the interactions of things happening in Armenian or in Georgian and Greek and Latin, that have never been, no one's ever really been able to explore before, because nobody has all of the language they want to work with. And no matter how many languages you have, even if you're Dutch, or Swiss or something, and you know all these languages, there's always another language that you don't know. I think there's always more than, so we have to think about expanding our cognitive ability and knowing what we can do with the tools at our disposal and what we can't do. All right, some other threads from people, things we should be thinking about in the next day or so. Yes, Daniel.
Well, Greg, you might have raised the distinction between databases and the reflective, scholarly reflection, and it seems pretty clear that much that is going on in digital documents now belongs on the heading of databases, and scholarly reflection is still being conducted mostly on paper, and it would be good to see that change.
Yeah, I think that I was really excited with Chris Blackwell's talk this morning and it was early, so I don't know how many people were awake, but he's really talking about how to, taking what was expository prose of arguing about how you could construe or organize a text in alternate ways, and then representing some of that in a machine actionable form as graphs that you can then compare and visualize differently. Now that has one outcome, that once you shift that representation to the graph form, it's a lot easier to understand those differences if you're thinking in Arabic or you're thinking in Lithuanian or you're thinking in some other language, because you're looking at Greek at a fairly abstract representation, as opposed to looking at an English translation of the scholia and trying to map that onto the text. So a lot of and I think, for me as a classicist, a project I wish Matteo would be able to do is go through and fish out all the primary source citations in Pauli Vasova. Because many of us use we had this humongous 150 volume encyclopedia of the ancient world. It's like some of the volumes are over 100 years old. Some of them you don't believe anything they say, but they cite all the primary sources, or most of the primary sources. So you tend to go back to them to find all the evidence. A lot of our arguments change if the evidence can be abstracted out and seen. You ought to be able to figure out what the argument is often. So I think that we're really, the way I would construe the question you're posing is, we always need expository prose at some level to explain what we're doing, but our arguments need to include queries or machine actionable data, things you can't put on paper. And you're going to reach the point. In fact, I think in some disciplines you've already reached the point. And conceptually, I think I've reached the point where if you can represent your argument in a PDF fully, it's not a very interesting argument, or it's not a mature argument anymore. The degenerate case of that, the simplest case of that, is all your citations have to be machine actionable. That doesn't change the format of your argument, but it changes the way in which it is used. But I think that if you have an argument about the change in semantics, the change in the meaning of a word over time, and your evidence should include hundreds of thousands of citations that you've analyzed statistically, and where you've analyzed a subset very carefully, and you've taken 1%, 2%, some subset, as much as you can do, and you have an understanding of how representative that subset is. But you have to say, here's the data. Here's the million citations I have. You can go replicate this by doing your own subset or challenging me. That's kind of a simple example. But there you need the whole corpus available. So I think we haven't been in a position to support this kind of publication yet. We haven't had the infrastructure, but I think we will. We're having it in Greek and Latin. And again, the degenerate case is you have one crappy edition of everything, and you have a page image of the edition from which it comes, and the mechanism to improve that and augment it and say, you idiot, you've left out all the, here's some textual data you need to know to actually understand this. So you have to have a dynamic system that's good enough to start. I think this is one of the things Donald talked about. It's one thing when you say, type in, give me this text from scratch. It's another thing to say, here is a bad version of this text, and here's the source text from which the OCR was derived, and here's a way to fix it. And if you don't like it, fix it, and then we can make your stuff available. And I think that's the success you've had with that is something intuitively we know we think we should get, but you've actually gone out and done it. So I think this form of publication, the fact that you get like one point for your online publication, when you're my age, hopefully you'll say that and people will laugh and think how ridiculous that is. But maybe when hopefully you'll live long enough for that to be the case anyway. Cliff.
I wonder, it occurs to me to ask your question maybe a different way to connect these things. Databases versus digital editions, not that so much, but evidence versus arguments. And so we're getting good at representing evidence, and we are beginning to learn how to assemble it, how to curate it, and so forth. we're not very good at representing arguments. And we haven't, since the old AI days, I think, really thought about what it would mean to represent sophisticated arguments in a machine-readable way. So Christopher's example of using tree banks to prove certain things about Greek syntax goes, is a step that way. But we, as scholars as a whole, have a lot of other kinds of arguments we make that can be formalized to a certain degree. But the thought of being able to formalize that in a way that is so that the machine can participate not only in the retrieval of evidence, but the analysis of the strength of the argument and finding weaknesses. So it seems to be a major challenge that has been looked at and now set aside. And so I wonder whether that again is one of those things that we might want to begin to think about.
Yes, and I think that there are three stages there. Stage one, you make arguments, your arguments on paper or in a media, which is basically the same thing. Stage two, you put your arguments either on paper or you translate them into a tree bank or whatever machine context. And stage three, your arguments are so complex that they can only be presented by a software. And I have just seen any examples of stage three in my field that are really, really convincing. I would roll multiplex to us reaching that point would be good at that. But I think that the route goes to stage two, that we do the same things in our own head and with the software, and it's still training. But to muscle up.
Let me give you an example of what I think would be an argument that falls into category 3 that already exists. The argument hasn't been made, but it was, we were shown, Matteo showed graphs of the relative popularity of Virgil and Ovid during the 20th century. And they imply changes, certain changes in scholarly popularity, rise and fall, and so on. And I don't think anyone can read all of the data and look at all the passages that are being cited there, or they're being analyzed. And if you could, then we'll pick some bigger topic. There's always something larger. There, what you've got is a query, the results of a query, and you're doing a close analysis of a part of the output. But the full argument a fully scientific argument implies the ability to replicate the query as you implemented it at a given point in time, so someone else can go check to see what you saw and do a different sample, and then to replicate that query later with what may be a larger data set. And so, for example, in the Europeana example, the German Digital Library example that I like, this is, books printed in Germany in any language, or books printed in German in any country. I'm actually not sure what in Germany means in 1750, but whatever that means, whatever the precise definition. What happens when we add other national library collections like Gallica or the Polish digital library or Arabic? What we will see will change. So, but I think anyway, when anything that depends upon a database query with the idea that you should go look at all the data, that I think is already in stage 3 in a really simple way, just because of scale. But a simulation, we don't do a lot of simulations in our field, but a simulation would be one. And I think we may find ourselves doing that. I think, modeling language change. How does French turn into French? Go from Latin to French would be one. Other thoughts, because we're past 5, and everyone is looking like it's time the time has come to say thank you all very much. There will be food that we actually pay for downstairs in 402, one floor below us at 7 o'clock. If we don't see you then, hopefully we'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow here and continue on and forge forward.